Daylene Carlson, a 23-year-old, moved from Idaho to Stockton, California in 2011 to attend college. She was staying with her Aunt Maggie and was excited to begin this new chapter of her life. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Daylene was preparing to go out for the evening. With 3 months left before college started, her cousin Cicely had planned to introduce her to the local nightlife. They were supposed to meet friends at Finnegan's Bar, but Cicely wasn't feeling well due to a fever and decided to stay home. Daylene went to the bar alone and was expected to return by 1 a.m. However, when 1 a.m. came and Daylene hadn't returned, her Aunt Maggie became concerned. She tried calling Daylene multiple times but received no response. She stayed up all night, repeatedly calling Daylene's phone, but there was still no answer. At first, she thought Daylene might have stayed overnight at a friend's house. By morning, not seeing any sign of her niece, she decided to contact the police and report her missing. The police took Maggie's report but initially hoped that Daylene had simply stayed with friends and would return soon. Meanwhile, Daylene's family took action, spreading the word of her disappearance on social media and urging anyone with information to come forward. Her unexplained absence was highly unusual, leading the family to fear that something terrible might have occurred. On August 8, 2011, the day after Daylene's disappearance, the police officially launched an investigation. Detectives began by visiting Maggie's house. They searched Daylene's room, interviewed family members, and worked to rule out the possibility of family involvement in her disappearance. Daylene was a typical American girl, young, attractive, and full of dreams for the future. Her sudden disappearance was alarming and out of character. Detectives searched her room but found no signs suggesting she had run away. All her belongings, including important documents, were still there. A photo taken by Cicely on the night of her disappearance showed her wearing a brown and white striped top and ripped jeans. According to Cicely, she had planned to visit Finnegan's Bar that evening, a place they often went to together. The next step for the detectives was to visit Finnegan's Bar and interview the staff to gather more information. The bar manager recalled seeing Daylene outside on the street around midnight on the night she vanished. He reviewed the incident of the evening but didn't notice anything unusual. The bar had 2 functional security cameras that recorded hours of footage from Saturday night, footage the detectives hoped would provide crucial leads. Since reviewing all the footage would take time, the detectives obtained a copy to analyze at the police station. They aimed to identify whom Daylene interacted with and, most importantly, whom she left the bar with. Initially, the footage didn't reveal anything unusual. It captured typical scenes of young people gathered outside the bar, talking, smoking, and enjoying their night. However, one young woman stood out because of her brown and white striped top, which matched what Daylene had been wearing. Upon closer inspection, the detectives confirmed that the woman was indeed Daylene. They carefully tracked her movements on camera to piece together what happened. At 12:41 a.m., she was seen re-entering the bar. Another surveillance camera, located in the hallway near the restrooms, captured additional footage of her movements, which the detectives reviewed next. At 12:47 a.m., 6 minutes after re-entering the bar, Daylene appeared on the hallway surveillance footage. She was drinking and seemed at ease, though perhaps slightly vulnerable. She was the only woman in a hallway surrounded by several young men, making everyone in the footage either a potential suspect or a witness. The surveillance video showed Daylene looking happy and relaxed until a young man entered the frame at 12:48 a.m. The man approached her from behind and placed his arm around her waist. Shortly after that, she walked into the restroom. The man, who had a goatee and wore a backward cap, lingered further down the hallway. Daylene didn't appear noticeably upset by his presence, nor did she appear particularly pleased to see him. After reviewing the footage, detectives recognized the need to identify the man in question. They spoke again with Daylene's family and friends to gather more details. Through these conversations, they discovered that the man seen putting his arm around Daylene was Jason Gilley. Daylene, Cicely, and their group of friends were familiar with Jason and frequently attended social events at his house. Detectives soon located Jason's home to question him about the night Daylene vanished. Jason told detectives that he had spent the evening at the bar with Daylene and initially planned to take her home. However, he claimed he left early due to an emergency. His young son was sick. He stated he left the bar around 1 a.m. and arrived home by 1:30 a.m. He also revealed the name of another person who might be significant, Jacob Evangelisti. According to Jason, Daylene was dating Jacob, but they had a heated argument in his presence just 4 days before she disappeared. This detail caught the detectives' attention, as jealousy often plays a role in impulsive or harmful actions. They decided to investigate Jacob Evangelisti further to determine if he could provide additional information. Investigators found recent photos of Jacob on Daylene's social media pages, prompting them to review the bar's security footage again to see if Jacob was present. They focused on footage from 10:06 p.m. when Daylene exited the restroom. She stepped outside and approached a man leaning against the wall. Her demeanor suddenly shifted. She began gesturing aggressively and appeared visibly angry. Detectives tried to determine if the man was Jacob, but glare from the bright lights made his face unclear. After a brief exchange, Daylene walked away. The detectives continued examining the footage until the man turned toward the camera, confirming his identity as Jacob. Jacob was brought in for questioning. During the interview, he appeared noticeably anxious. When asked about his relationship with Daylene and the last time he saw her, Jacob explained that their final encounter was at Finnegan's bar. According to Jacob, Daylene broke up with him that night, which upset him deeply because he didn't want the relationship to end. He claimed that Daylene eventually left the bar without him and insisted he had no involvement in her disappearance. The detectives reviewed CCTV footage to verify Jacob's story. At 1:09 a.m., Jacob entered the bar. A few minutes later, Daylene appeared on camera. She seemed to be saying goodbye to one of the customers, and by 1:15 a.m., she was no longer visible. The detectives continued watching the footage until the bar closed and all the customers had left. By 2:38 a.m., the lights were off, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Neither Daylene nor Jacob appeared on the footage again. At this stage, suspicion fell on Jacob's potential involvement in Daylene's disappearance, as he may still have been upset over their breakup. However, there was no concrete evidence of foul play. Meanwhile, Daylene's family launched their own search efforts. They created and distributed flyers throughout the city, hoping that someone might have seen Daylene after she left the bar or had information about what had happened to her. At the Stockton Police Department, detectives questioned Jacob again about Daylene's disappearance. He continued to deny knowing anything, but this time, he mentioned the new name, James Cozens. Jacob claimed that James was Daylene's new boyfriend. Although James wasn't officially her boyfriend, the two were romantically involved. Things are further complicated when James is Jason Gilley's best friend and roommate. The timing of Daylene's relationship with James and her sudden disappearance raised suspicions about James and whether he could have been involved in what happened to her. Detectives brought James to the station to discuss his relationship with Daylene. He admitted that they had been seeing each other but insisted he knew nothing about the night she visited the bar, claiming that he was out of the city at the time. While the police were verifying his alibi, he revealed something important. On the night Daylene disappeared, she sent him a text saying she was with a new guy. He showed detectives the messages on his phone, which included one from Daylene mentioning that she was leaving the bar to attend a friend's party. Although the identity of the friend remained unknown, detectives developed a new theory. Daylene might have been looking to continue the night's festivities, possibly stopping at a liquor store or a grocery store on the way. Investigators created a list of nearby 24-hour liquor stores, with the closest one to Finnegan's being Food 4 Less. Detectives visited the store and discovered it had security cameras both inside and outside. If Daylene had been there, the cameras would have captured her on video. The detectives began reviewing footage from the store's outdoor security camera, and their instincts proved correct. The video showed Daylene entering the store with a young man, but his face wasn't visible, as the footage only captured his back. Unable to identify him, the detectives reviewed footage from other cameras. Soon, they spotted Daylene and the man purchasing what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol. They then turned back to the exterior camera footage to wait for the pair to leave the store. At 1:31 a.m., Daleen and her companion exited the store, and this time, the man's appearance was clearer. His backward baseball cap and goatee matched the description of Jason Gilley, whose face had earlier been identified in footage from Finnegan's bar. This discovery gave the detectives a fresh lead. Jason had previously told investigators that he left the bar alone and was home by 1:30 a.m., taking care of his sick son. However, they now had clear evidence showing him leaving the liquor store with Daleen at 1:31 a.m. The lie about leaving the bar alone instantly made Jason their prime suspect. 1 week after Daleen's disappearance, the police arrested Jason. After his arrest, detectives waited an hour to observe Jason's behavior before beginning the interrogation. Without mentioning the security footage, they revisited Jason's account of the night, asking him again when he returned home from the bar. Jason repeated his lie, claiming he left around 1 a.m. to check on his sick son after receiving a text message from his grandmother. At this point, detectives confronted him, revealing that they had spoken to his grandmother, who denied sending him any messages that night. Jason admitted that his grandmother hadn't contacted him and claimed that he went home alone to be with his son. When asked who he left with, he repeatedly insisted he left alone and went straight home. Detectives caught on to his lies, realizing he was trapping himself in contradictions. They informed him they had surveillance footage disproving his statements. At this point, Jason changed his story, admitting he left the bar with Daleen, went to Food for Less, and bought her a bottle of Jägermeister, but he claimed he drove her back to the bar before heading home. When asked why he initially lied about leaving with Daleen, he said it had slipped his mind. Jason then explained that he had invited Daleen to spend the night on his couch, and she agreed. He admitted they drank the bottle of Jägermeister together and engaged in intimate contact. Afterward, she became upset, said it was a mistake, and decided to walk home. Through tears, Jason shared another version of events, stating that early Sunday morning, while giving Daleen a ride home, they had an argument. He claimed he used his grandmother's car to pick Daleen up near his house. During the 30 to 45-minute drive, Daleen was angry, repeatedly demanded to be let out of the car, and accused Jason of being a horrible person and a piece of garbage. As Jason pulled over, Daleen allegedly got out of the car and ran away. He said that was the last time he saw her. After recounting this story, Jason asked for a lawyer, effectively ending the interview. With insufficient evidence to charge him, the police had no choice but to release him. A few days later, on August 22nd, Jason went to the police station to report his wallet as lost or stolen. Detectives investigating Daleen's disappearance were surprised to see him there. Detective Robert Fain approached Jason and suggested they retrace the route he had taken on the day Daleen disappeared. Jason agreed and led the detective to the spot where he claimed Daleen had jumped out of the car and run away. When the detective asked why Jason hadn't tried to stop her, he explained that a car behind him was honking, so he got back on the freeway. Jason said he had looked for Daleen for 10 to 15 minutes but had to stop because he was running low on gas. He mentioned that he then drove to a gas station on Arch Road in Stockton. Using this information, the detective decided to investigate the gas station. Fortunately, the station had surveillance cameras. The camera footage revealed that Jason arrived at the gas station near the Arch Road exit on Highway 99 in Stockton at 10:46 a.m. on August 7, 2011. He was alone. This was 9 hours and 2 minutes after surveillance footage had captured Jason and Daleen together at a liquor store. At first, Jason's behavior at the gas station appeared normal, but one detail stood out. He looked disheveled, with dirt on his arms and shirt. At one point, the video showed him brushing dirt off his shoulders, which seemed suspicious. He then walked back to his car. Before leaving the station, he checked the passenger door, got into the car, reopened the passenger door about 20 seconds later, and quickly slammed it shut. According to Jason, Daleen was the last person to use that door. Finally, he drove off. After reviewing the footage, detectives developed a new theory. They suspected that Jason had taken Daleen to a field south of Stockton, where he dragged her out of the car in such a rush that the passenger door didn't close completely. They believed Daleen was no longer alive but needed concrete evidence to confirm her death before arresting Jason. Meanwhile, he remained at large, continuing to speak to reporters while Daleen's whereabouts remained unknown. On October 15, 2011, more than 2 months after Daleen's disappearance, there was a major breakthrough in the case. A farmer discovered human remains in a cornfield 20 miles outside of Stockton. Court documents later confirmed that the remains belonged to Daleen and were located approximately 64 feet from Lone Tree Road in Escalon. Sarah Yoshida, a senior criminalist with the Department of Justice, was dispatched to investigate the scene. That afternoon, Sarah found numerous human bones, including a skull, jaw, ribs, vertebrae, foot bones, and leg bones. A torso and a clump of hair were also recovered. Additionally, a black bra was discovered between the remains and a nearby road. Investigators also found 5 shell casings southeast of where the body was located. Later that evening, at around 9 p.m., Dr. Bennett Omalu, a medical examiner for San Joaquin County, arrived at the scene. He requested the soil beneath the body be excavated. 18 inches of soil were removed, placed in a body bag, and then x-rayed, revealing 2 bullets buried in the dirt. Bennett performed an autopsy on Daleen's remains and concluded that she had been shot in the cornfield where her body was found. The bullets had either passed through her body and embedded in the soil beneath or fallen out as her body decomposed. There was a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Her fingers, fingernails, and jewelry were tangled in her hair, which suggested that her hands were near her head when she was shot. The cause of her death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head, with additional gunshot wounds to her torso contributing to her death. Based on the level of decomposition, Bennett concluded that Daleen had likely died on August 7, 2011. Investigators quickly identified Jason Gilley as the prime suspect. He had access to a Jennings semi-automatic handgun owned by a family member. The weapon was seized, and ballistic testing conclusively proved that it was used to kill Daleen. As a result, he was arrested, and investigators started piecing together the events from the night of Daleen's disappearance. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Daleen went to a bar to meet friends, including Jason. At some point during the evening, he persuaded her to go to his house. On their way, they stopped at a liquor store, which was the last location where Daleen was seen alive. Security footage from the store showed no signs of anything unusual. However, after they left the store, events took a tragic turn that ultimately led to Daleen's death. When Daleen's body was discovered, she was naked. Investigators suspected that she may have rejected Jason's advances, prompting him to force himself on her. Although this was considered the most plausible motive, the advanced decomposition of Daleen's body made confirmation impossible. Authorities speculated that when she threatened to report Jason to the police, he forced her into his car, drove far beyond her home, and ultimately killed her in a remote field. In November 2013, Jason Gilley was convicted of Daleen Carlson's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He later attempted to appeal the sentence, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Veronica Youngblood. 30 years old, Veronica Youngblood originally came from Argentina. The exact timing of her move to the United States is unclear, but she grew up in poverty. At the young age of 16, she gave birth to her first daughter, Sharon. At that time, she started working as a call girl to support herself and earn money. In 2007, she met Ronald Youngblood, a pilot in the U.S. Navy, who was one of her clients. They quickly started dating, and in 2009, they got married in Las Vegas. Marrying Ronald brought stability to Veronica's life, offering her a home, a supportive husband, and assistance in caring for her daughter. A few years later, in 2012, Veronica and Ronald welcomed a daughter together named Brooklyn. Sharon is described as a sweet and kind girl who is always willing to help others. She is currently in 10th grade at Octina High School and participates in figure skating. Coach Lynette Carroll, who has coached she for about 4 years, commented that she is a persistent and hardworking athlete who has performed well in competitions. Sharon was a good student with a bright future ahead of her. She often talks about her dream of becoming a singer and has a great group of friends, which makes her popular. Brooklyn, 5, is a smart, loving little girl who loves animals. She is adored by her family. However, the relationship between her parents, Veronica and Ronald, is strained. They often argued, which prompted the police to intervene. In 2014, while Ronald and his family were in Honduras, she called the local police to report that she and Ronald had a disagreement, during which he became physically violent. During this time, the family said Ronald began to suspect Veronica of having an affair. After that, their relationship deteriorated, and some people said he became more domineering, jealous, and possessive. They said that while in Honduras, he began denying his wife access to transportation, money, and even the internet. At one point, Veronica sought assistance from the U.S. Embassy to facilitate her emergency return to the United States, which was granted. After their time in Honduras, Ronald was assigned to the Navy Department in Washington, D.C., and they moved to Florida. There, they effectively separated, but continued to live together. Following their time in Florida, they relocated with their children to Oakton, Virginia, and began divorce proceedings. They continued to live in the same house though, possibly because they wanted to raise their 2 daughters together and because Veronica was unemployed, so could not afford to live independently. However, the divorce proceedings and child custody battle put further strain on their relationship. During this process, Veronica applied for student loans and named Ronald as a guarantor without his consent. This led to a number of disputes. By September 2016, the court decided that they could continue living together in Oakton and have joint custody of their daughter Brooklyn, without either party having to pay alimony. In October 2016, Ronald filed for a protective order to protect himself from Veronica. He alleged that she took his phone and threw it in the toilet, poured water on his laptop, and scratched his car. As a result, the court ordered she to move out of their shared home and maintain a distance of 500 feet from Ronald and Brooklyn until a hearing, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The hearing was finalized on October 31, 2016, and the divorce was finalized. After the hearing, Veronica most likely moved back into the marital home because she and Ronald began living together again. Everything went smoothly until March 2018, when Ronald and Veronica failed to appear in court. They filed a joint consent form for a 14 years project that stated they both wanted to move to Sedalia, Missouri, with their 2 daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, in August 2018. They chose Missouri because that's where most of Ronald's family lives. The agreement that the two signed and filed with the court stated that Veronica would be given her own apartment, 30 miles away from Ronald's home, and that he would be responsible for paying rent for the next 3 years. During this period, they would share joint custody of their daughter, Brooklyn. The court approved this arrangement and the move was planned. However, on April 13, 2018, she changed her mind about moving, hired a new lawyer, and sought to change the custody agreement. She explained that her situation had changed since the initial agreement was filed. Veronica said she had gotten a good-paying job and would work full-time, but to do this, she needed to stay in Virginia. She also said that she was in the process of buying her own home so that she could live independently of Ronald without his support. In her revised request, she sought full custody of Brooklyn, with the intention of letting their daughter live with her. The dispute between Ronald and Veronica was adjudicated in July 2018. The decision was made that there was no change. Both parties still had to move to Missouri as previously agreed. By August 2018, the judge refused to change the decision, and both parties signed this document to agree. 10 days later, Ronald notified the court of his new address in Missouri, where he planned to move in mid-August 2018. Sadly, this move would never take place. On August 5, 2018, 911 operator Jennifer Hoffman received a call from a 15-year-old girl who was crying out in pain. Sharon pleaded for help, saying she has just been attacked. When Jennifer asked who attacked her, she responded, her mother, Veronica. Sharon said her mother came into room while she and her younger sister, Brooklyn, were sleeping. Her mother said she was going to take her to God, then attacked her. Jennifer tried to reassure Sharon, informing her that help was on the way and to stay calm. However, Jennifer then heard the girl screaming and moaning in pain, repeatedly pleading. She said she didn't want to die. Please help her. Finally, in the evening, the rescue team arrived at the apartment on Lincoln Street. They found Sharon alive, with 2 wounds, one in the back and one in the chest. Tragically, her little sister Brooklyn was discovered dead in her bed due to injury to the head. Sharon was still alive at the time, but in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she did not survive. She fought bravely, but died just a few days later. When police arrived at the scene, they did not find Ronald or Veronica. Later that evening, they located Veronica. She went to a friend's house and knocked on the door, with a gun in her hand. Her friend called 911, leading to her swift detention. Upon her arrest, officers discovered she still had the gun with her and was driving a rental car. The police also found 2 ammunition magazines for the weapon. During her interrogation just a few hours later, Veronica confessed that she had bought the gun with plans to kill her daughters, Ronald and Veronica. Then she will die too. She mentioned that she was unhappy with her life, but did not elaborate further. The police later learned that immediately after the shootings, she called Ronald to inform him that she had killed their daughters, and she intended to die as well, adding that she hated him. During the police interrogation, Veronica confessed to her guilt. When the investigator asked what punishment she thought she deserved, she stated it should be the death penalty. Although Virginia has abolished the death penalty, the officers present during the interrogation noted that she spoke in a flat, emotionless manner throughout. As a result, she was charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of her 2 children. At her initial court hearing, she indicated that she did not require a public defender and did not want to hire a private attorney. However, eventually, she hired a lawyer. And at her plea hearing, she pleaded guilty, citing insanity. Veronica delayed each court hearing in her case. The next hearing was pushed back for several months because she repeatedly refused to leave prison to attend. Ultimately, the murder trial began in March 2023. Recently, the prosecution argued that she was not insane. Instead, they claimed she had carefully planned the murders of her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, as revenge against her ex-husband, Ronald. The murder occurred just days before Brooklyn and Ronald moved to Missouri. Veronica had just gone through a difficult divorce and was trying to get revenge. The prosecution presented a detailed timeline, demonstrating the premeditation behind the crimes. 9 days before the murders, Veronica attended a local gun show and purchased a gun. Prosecutors allege she did this with the intention of killing both her daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn. On the day before the shootings, Sharon asked Veronica if her mother had planned to kill her and Brooklyn, and if so, that would be horrible. The prosecution contended that Veronica had been plotting the murders for several days. On the day of the crime, they claimed she gave both children chewing gum laced with sleeping pills to incapacitate them. She then went into each room and attacked each of his daughters. During the investigation, it was discovered that Veronica had attacked Brooklyn in the head, causing her instant death. For Sharon, after the first attack, little girl woke up and started screaming. She asked her mother why she had shot her, and her mother replied that little girl was going to see God. Veronica then struck her again in the chest and left the apartment. Finally, Veronica called Ronald and left a voice message saying, "She killed Brooklyn, she killed Sharon, and she will die. She hates him. Goodbye." The prosecution alleged that Veronica was a liar and a manipulator. They said she caused chaos and shirked responsibility for her own gain. They described her as cruel, selfish, vengeful, and calculating. They claimed that she planned and executed the murder plot to get revenge on her ex-husband, Ronald. The defense, on the other hand, argued that she was suffering from psychological problems. They said she had been abused by a cruel man who had physically and mentally abused her. The defense claimed that Ronald never loved her and that she had suffered abuse since childhood. The lawyers again pointed to the poverty that Veronica and her younger sister lived in. They said she had suffered abuse from her grandfather and daily beatings from her parents, to the point where she was at one point unable to walk. Her father would often beat her with tree branches, belts, and brooms. After years of living in such cruel conditions, her parents abandoned she and her younger sister without a word, leaving them to fend for themselves. Then, Veronica was forced to turn to sex work to provide for her daughter and support her sister. During the proceedings, her younger sister gave a statement in which mentions that since childhood, she has followed a South American religion called Umbanda. This religion believes in the existence of a supreme creator, the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead, and the concept of reincarnation, spiritual growth through various practices. The defense used this information to argue that Veronica believed she had the ability to communicate with the dead. The defense argued that Veronica had suffered abuse and neglect in her past, and that in addition to these factors, she suffered from severe mental illness. She reported having heard voices throughout her life. At trial, she claimed that she had heard voices that night, leading her to believe that she had to kill her daughters. The defense argued that she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. They asserted that she was terrified that her children would experience the same abuse she endured as a child if they were separated from her. Veronica's defense team said she went to the police and asked for the death penalty. This shows that she intends to die. During the trial, various witnesses, including doctors who attempted to save Sharon's life and people who knew Veronica, Ronald during their marriage, provided testimony. One of the witnesses was Manuel, a defense attorney, who met Veronica by chance at the time of the incident. He shared that they met in the summer of 2018, and when they first met, she seemed calm and composed. However, by the end of July, things had changed. Manuel said that in late July, Veronica shared with him that she had lost her nursing job, which would have prevented her from moving to Missouri, as she had said in court. During their conversations, she expressed a desire for a more serious relationship, but he responded that he was not ready for a serious relationship. Therefore, the two decided to end their relationship at that time. A few days later, she sent him a text claiming she was pregnant with his child. On July 31st, he visited her home to discuss the pregnancy. Upon arrival, he noticed the apartment was dark, lit only by candles, which created a romantic atmosphere. Although they talked, but he soon left because he felt unsafe. He said that after that conversation, he no longer trusted Veronica's word about her pregnancy. He didn't believe anything she said. It is highly unlikely that she was pregnant, as there were no reports from the prison indicating that she had given birth or experienced a miscarriage. After their conversation, Manuel instructed his lawyer to send Veronica a letter, telling her not to contact him again. He mentioned that he saw she again on August 5, when she appeared at his doorstep. She was calm and seemed cold, asking to come in. However, he refused to open the door and asked her to leave. Veronica advised Manuel to call the police, as they were looking for her. When he inquired why the police were looking for her, she revealed, because she just killed her daughters. At that point, she pulled a gun from her belt and explained her actions to him. Following this, he called 911 to report her location. During the trial, the focus turned to Sharon's 911 call, in which little girl told the dispatcher that she was dying because her mother had just attacked her. At that moment, Veronica stood up and cried out. Veronica couldn't take it anymore. The judge decided to adjourn the trial and informed the jury that Veronica had asked for a waiver because she had interrupted the hearing. Veronica then testified, with tears streaming down her face, about the trauma she had endured. The jury and several others in attendance were moved to tears as she shared the horrors of her life. Ronald attended the trial. He also took the stand to speak about how wonderful his daughters, Sharon and Brooklyn, were, expressing his deep love for them and his devastation over the incident. The prosecution's strong arguments convinced the jury to find Veronica guilty. She purchased the gun 9 days before the murder and had given her daughters sleeping medication beforehand, leaving them defenseless. This clearly indicated that she had planned the act well in advance. It was not a spontaneous decision made in a moment of madness. On the final day, she followed through with her plan, reinforcing that this was not an impulsive act. Veronica claimed that she was mentally ill and did not intend to commit the crime. She had endured abuse throughout her life, which contributed to her mental health struggles. She believed that her actions were meant to protect her daughters from the same abuse she experienced as a child. After a 2-week trial, the jury began their deliberations and returned the next day with a verdict. They determined that Veronica was not insane at the time of the crime and found her guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Brooklyn and Sharon, as well as for using a firearm during the commission of the crime. During the sentencing phase, the jury decided that prison was the appropriate consequence for Veronica. Upon hearing her sentence, Veronica reacted with anger, shouting, "No, no," and leaping from her chair. Court officials had to escort her out of the courtroom. Then, she was taken back to prison, under special surveillance. A few days later, the jury returned to impose a sentence of 36 years in prison for each murder and an additional 3 years for each firearm offense. In total, Veronica will serve 78 years in prison. Throughout their relationship, Ronald and Veronica both caused each other harm. She may have had some psychological issues, believing that harming her daughters would get back at her ex-husband, Ronald. However, he is not without fault either, and many of Veronica's past experiences likely shaped her personality and her relationship with he. If Veronica feared her daughters would suffer the same abuse she endured as a child, it's important to note that she had full custody of Sharon, and only Brooklyn had to leave. She needed to move to Missouri, a plan she had agreed upon with Ronald. If she had followed through with this move, Brooklyn would not have been so far away from her. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Peter Vlasiuk. There are cases that shock the public, not only because of their brutality, but also due to the elaborate plots to conceal the truth. The story of Peter Vlasiuk and the mysterious death of his wife, Patty Vlasiuk, is one of those cases. What began as a reported truck accident gradually revealed suspicious clues that could not be ignored. This case serves as a lesson about trust and conflicts in close relationships. So, how does this story unfold? Let's watch today's video together. Patty Vlasiuk, also known as Patricia Vlasiuk, was born on February 19, 1967, in this hit England. Later, her family moved to the city of Strong, New York State. She grew up and became a certified nurse, working in a hospital. Peter Vlasiuk was born on February 9, 1969, in New Jersey. After school, he went to the Army and later worked as a truck driver, in which he transported new cars. When Peter was visiting relatives in Sydney, he met Patty. He moved to this area, and the couple eloped to Las Vegas in 1996. Peter got married to Patty, who at that time was already a mother from a previous marriage. The Lasiuk family had 3 daughters, Ashley, Jolene, and Rebecca. In 1997, they bought a house with a swimming pool and opened their family business, Bar Angel. Peter worked enthusiastically on the design of the establishment, creating a dance floor with wood and a stage on which various musical groups performed. Things in the family were going well. The bar was very popular with local residents. Peter loved to flirt with visitors to the bar, and there were rumors that he had affairs on the side. Peter loved to give gifts to please Patty, and on her 35th birthday, he gave her a new ultra-modern stethoscope and tonometer, arranging a great party. On April 3, 2002, he went to the bar in his pickup. In the evening, he came home and started waiting for his wife, thinking that she had picked up the children after work. When she did not call him around 20:30, he began to worry and asked if she knew where the children was. Soon after that, Patty arrived home without the children. Peter asked her why she didn't pick up the kids, and they argued because Patty thought he would pick them up. While driving the pickup and smoking, Patty, for a second, tried to shake off the ashes of a cigarette when a deer came out onto the road. She sharply turned the wheel to avoid a collision, and the car fell into the lake. Peter was able to open his passenger door and get out of the sinking car. He tried to pull his wife out but couldn't. The water was very cold, and he got out of the water faster. The man ran for help to the nearest houses, knocking on doors, but no one opened. Finally, in one house, Jessica Becker and Thomas, Peter's friend, opened the door. Thomas called 911 while waiting for rescuers. Later, they arrived at the lake where a white pickup truck was visible about 10 meters from the shore. Thomas put on a wetsuit and fins and dived under the water to the car, but didn't find Patty. The rescuers who arrived with a team of scuba divers pulled her out of the cold lake and found her face down, 2 meters from the car, which was submerged in 4 meters of water. She was taken to the same hospital where she had worked for 17 years, but died shortly after her arrival. Peter was also taken to the hospital by ambulance, where he was warmed up and changed into dry clothes. During the interrogation, Peter told the story about the deer and added that Patty liked to drink, which was true. Patty had several violations for drunk driving, but that night when she died, the alcohol content was insignificant, as shown by the toxicological examination. The investigators checked Peter's story and noticed that there were no skid marks on the road and that the car fell exactly in that place of the road where there was no fence. This was strange. The police also took the pickup truck out of the lake, and experts began to study its door, which Peter said opened in the water. The door was closed from the inside, which meant he could not have opened it. Later, he began to claim that he climbed out through the window. It was also strange that there was a burdock found in Patty's hair that did not grow near the lake. According to Peter, she would return to work, and they immediately pick up the kids. She did not lie on the ground and did not walk so that the thorns of the burdock would cling. The investigators visited Vlasiuk's house and discovered some plants nearby. They found a burdock plant with a broken branch and strands of hair. Peter's boots were covered in several thorns. Divers searched the lake bed for burdock but could not locate any. However, they did find Peter's coat submerged in the water, which had repellent on it. Besides, inside one of the pockets, they discovered her driver's license. During lab analysis, more items were uncovered in the pockets, including a toolbox that had been found at the bottom of the lake but had not been opened. Patty had bruises and wounds on her body, including her neck, but the pathologist, James Terzian, determined that drowning was the cause of death. The inconsistencies in the case made investigators uneasy, prompting them to investigate further for clues. They discovered a strange video involving an intimate relationship between 3 people filming their children, husband and wife, Vlasiuk, and Joyce Warden, nanny of their children. Just 9 hours after his wife's death, Peter contacted the insurance company to claim over $100 $150,000 in life insurance payments. This raised the suspicions of the police, leading them to investigate further. As a result, Peter became the primary suspect. Investigators believed that on the night of April 3, 2002, Peter had left their children with a nanny and went to kill Patty near their home. After she had consumed alcohol, he is suspected of killing her, possibly strangling her, as indicated by the petechiae found on her neck, which are small pinpoint hemorrhages. Following the attack, he allegedly dragged her body through the grass, which could explain the burdock stuck in her hair and on his shoes. He then placed her in a truck, drove to the lake, and pushed the vehicle into the water. A new discovery is, Peter wanted Joyce Worden to be his new girlfriend. He sought full custody of their children and aimed to use life insurance money to pay off his debts. The police reached out to the pathologist conducting the autopsy about the burrs found in Patty's hair and coat. This led the pathologist to reconsider the cause of death and conclude that she had been strangled. From the evidence collected, on April 8, 2002, the police arrested Peter and detained him without bail. The trial started a few months later. Joyce Cardozo, Patty's mother, attended every day with her adult children, Lori, and her grandchildren, William. In court, Peter testified that Patty had been singing and drinking. He said that he asked Patty to stop, which made her so angry that she drove off the road into a lake and refused to get out of the sinking car. Peter claimed he mentioned a deer to the police to protect his wife's reputation, worrying that they might take away her nursing license. However, Peter's brother did not confirm that Patty had been drinking, and the prosecution argued that alcohol was not related to the case at all. A toxicology report indicated that there was only a very small amount of alcohol in Patty's system after the accident. The defense argued that burdock could not have become tangled in her hair while she was in the water. The lawyer pointed out that in April, the ground was muddy after the snow had melted, yet Patty had no dirt on her shoes, clothes, or hair. Additionally, there were no indications of a struggle near the pickup. They were simply in the yard by the bushes. Other than some hair on Patty's body, there was no dirt found beneath her fingernails. In reply, the prosecutor argued that the water could have washed away any dirt. In court, Joyce Worden revealed that it was actually Patty who started the group relationship, not Peter, surprising everyone present. She also confessed to having an intimate relationship with Peter, separate from his wife. Peter's mother testified that Peter consumed a significant amount of alcohol and recalled finding 20 large cans of beer near their home one day. Additionally, she noted that Peter quickly contacted the insurance company regarding payment, and she encouraged him to do so because they needed the money. During the trial, Patty's co-workers stated that she was in a good mood when she arrived at work that day. However, in the afternoon, she had an argument with her husband, which left her very upset. Her colleagues suggested that she should divorce him, but Patty insisted that she still loved him. One co-worker claimed that Patty told her Peter had threatened Patty with a gun during the argument. Additionally, a neighbor living near the Guilford Lake, Jessica Becker, testified that when Peter rushed to their house for help, his hair was dry, even though he had supposedly just come out of the water. A regular at the bar also testified in court that Peter once boasted about being able to make murders appear accidental. Marlene Martin, one of the rescuers who responded at the lake, reported that Peter was pretending to have hypothermia on the night of the incident. She noticed he was sitting still until he saw her, after which he started shaking and spoke in a remorseful tone. The medical examiner for the prosecution stated that Patty had no water in her lungs, suggesting that she may have been choked before entering the water. Chief pathologist Safa Naman supported this conclusion. The jury convicted Peter, sentencing him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In the courtroom, many people, including law enforcement officers and Patty's sisters, embraced and shook hands. Patty's mother expressed her disbelief, saying, "I am still in a state of shock. I did not suspect Peter until he was arrested." She struggled to accept the situation. Peter's parents took custody of his children, while Patty's children from her first marriage began living with their mother. Peter filed several appeals. In one interview, he expressed frustration about being unable to obtain justice due to his lack of wealth, in spite of 2 of his appeals were accepted. Peter decided to change his lawyer because he felt the previous one was not effective, and he even hired a private detective. David Burrs, the detective, had 34 years of experience in the police force and understood the system well. He discovered some inaccuracies and irregularities in the police's handling of the case. Burrs believed that 1 or more police officers might have engaged in misconduct or interfered with the investigation. The handwriting in the diary found did not match Patty's, suggesting it was written by someone else. He also realized that some defense witnesses had not been called during the first trial. One of these was forensic pathologist James Terzian, who concluded that the cause of death was drowning. During the second trial, Dr. James Terzian testified for the defense, raising some questions about the case details. In response, the prosecution brought in another pathologist, Michael M. Baden, to support the original findings of the first pathologist. Baden claimed James to have performed thousands of autopsies, including numerous drownings. But James had only handled 2 drowning cases in his career. The lawyers also presented photographs taken near the lake, demonstrating that burdock plants do grow in that area. Despite the jury's divided opinions during deliberations, they ultimately found Peter guilty once more. He received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In September 2011, Peter filed an appeal, claiming that his lawyer was ineffective and pointing out mistakes made by the prosecution. He also requested to change the trial's location to ensure that the new jury would not be aware of his previous convictions, allowing them to be more impartial. However, it was revealed that the last jury was aware of his prior guilty verdicts, which may have influenced their decisions. In December 2011, the appellate court approved Peter's appeal, but the trial venue remained unchanged. In June 2012, the third trial commenced. A private detective had spent 15 years investigating Peter's case and strongly believed in his innocence. Alongside Peter's lawyer, they gathered numerous arguments to support him in court. During this trial, there was a significant clash between the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution argued that if Peter had lied about his wife swerving on the road to avoid a deer, then he must be lying about everything else. In contrast, the defense contended that Peter was trying to protect his wife, as a 6th drunk driving charge could cost her nursing license. The pathologist's third report originally indicated drowning as the cause of death, but was later revised to strangulation after considering the presence of burdock. He noted evidence of lung singeing and observed that there was insufficient water to support drowning. James A., on the other hand, maintains that Patty died of drowning. However, after analyzing the lungs and their weight, James concluded that the water content was inadequate to confirm drowning. The ambulance report stated that during the assistance to Patty, a lot of water was pumped out of her, and in the intensive care unit, it took 45 minutes. The prosecution argued that since there were no burdocks in the lake, it is likely that Patty was killed near her house, where burdocks were present, and then her body was disposed of in the water. In contrast, the defense pointed out that there were no signs of a struggle in the courtyard of Wlasiuk House. Simultaneously, no defensive wounds on Patty, and no dirt or DNA from her husband found under her nails. Furthermore, her white shoes and clothing remained clean, suggesting that water alone could not have washed away any potential dirt. An expert for the prosecution stated that the pickup truck entered the lake slowly, suggesting it was pushed rather than driven off the road quickly, as there were no skid marks present. In response, A defense expert challenged this claim, alleging that the prosecution's experts had made errors and presented photos that showed skid marks on the road. The prosecution maintained that Patty had almost no alcohol in her system, while the defense presented toxicology reports indicating she was intoxicated and had a history of multiple drunk driving offenses. Reply: the prosecution argued that witnesses who came forward claimed Peter's hair was dry while his body was wet, which contradicts earlier statements that he was wet all over. They also pointed out that hair belonging to Patty was found on the burdocks in the yard, indicating that the crime took place there. In response, the defense contended that it is normal for a homeowner's hair to be found in the yard and suggested that the wind could have carried it there, highlighting that there were no signs of a struggle. The prosecution argued that Peter had placed the pickup truck near the recall, while the defense contended that leaving her in such an obvious location was illogical. They claimed that if Peter had intended to harm Patty, he would have been more likely to put her in the cabin and use a seatbelt to pull her to the bottom of the lake. Patty was discovered in the water outside the car, indicating that her husband attempted to rescue her by pulling her out but could not get her to the surface. End of trial. Peter was sentenced to life in prison, but he could be eligible for early release after 25 years. The judge described him as a dangerous individual who poses a threat to society. In 2016, Peter's appeal was rejected, and he continued to serve his sentence. His oldest daughter visited him during this time. The case attracted significant public interest, leading to a group of supporters who believed he was innocent. Heather, a girl, discovered information about Peter while studying criminal law through social media. In 2015, she volunteered to assist him by sending a postcard. Although she worked hard to help him seek justice, all of his subsequent appeals were denied. A year later, Peter and Heather got married in prison. She expressed that their relationship was challenging and not for the faint of heart, but she had faith in him and planned to be with him no matter where he was. The couple believed that there was a conspiracy by law enforcement against Peter, claiming that some water was deliberately removed from the lungs before the autopsy. They think Patty had influential relatives who may have affected the outcome of the case. Her cousin worked in the district attorney's office, and her mother was a senior hospital prosecutor. At that time, the prosecutor needed to secure a conviction to boost their chances in an upcoming election for a judgeship, and this case helped them achieve that goal. Peter and Heather felt that Peter was simply unlucky and a victim of the situation. To support Peter, Heather created a fundraising page and a social media account to raise awareness about the case. Despite her efforts, Peter is still incarcerated at the Coxsackie Correctional Facility. In March 2027, he will be eligible for parole. The tragic case of Patty Wlaszczak is a chilling reminder of the potential darkness that can exist behind closed doors, even in seemingly ordinary lives. The unexpected twists and turns of the investigation, from inconsistencies in Peter's story to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death, paint a picture of a man willing to go to any lengths to cover up his crimes. Ultimately, Peter's conviction for second-degree murder after a lengthy legal battle brought some justice to Patty's family, although the emotional scars remain. The case not only underscores the importance of a thorough investigation, but also highlights the difficulty of uncovering the truth when the perpetrator is someone close to the victim. Thanks to the persistence of the authorities and the resilience of Patty's family, justice was finally served, bringing closure to a story that might otherwise have faded into darkness. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Va-Orica. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know, Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated, with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of 2 young men, Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details. And they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days. And her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his 2 friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a 1-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received two conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy, but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see anymore. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Eve Stratford. Eve Stratford was born on December 28, 1953, in Dortmund, West Germany, to parents Albert and Liza Stratford. Her mother was German, while her father was a British doctor who met in the 194 Eros. The family traveled the world, eventually settling in Aldershot, a small town in southeast England. Her younger brother was also born there. During her childhood, Eve won 3 beauty contests and dreamed of becoming a model who would feature on a popular magazine cover. In 1972, at the age of 18, Eve met Tony Priest, a young musician and lead singer of a band called Onyx. They believed that moving to London would boost their chances of success. In 1973, Eve, Tony, and 3 other band members relocated to Leighton in East London. They rented a 4-bedroom flat and lived together. Due to their limited finances, they struggled to make ends meet and slept on old mattresses on the floor instead of beds. Eve Stratford had the ambition to succeed in the modeling industry. Shortly after moving to London, she found a job at the Playboy Club in Park Lane, thanks to a friend's recommendation. She quickly became popular with the club's wealthy clientele, which included millionaires, politicians, celebrities, and even individuals in the criminal underworld. She also became a favorite of the club's owner, Victor Oberlans. All the waitresses at the club wore velvet and bow ties to serve the most prestigious guests in London. At work, Eve introduced herself as Eve Von Bach, or Eve Bunny. She proudly shared photos of herself with comedians Eric Morecambe and Sid James, as well as a photo with boxing champion John Conti. She mailed these photos to her parents and felt proud of herself, but she always dreamed of more. In 1975, at the age of 21, Eve applied to be a Playboy cover model, but was rejected. However, fortune smiled upon her when she received an invitation to pose for the cover of Mayfair, Playboy's British rival. Adopting the pseudonym Eve Von Bach, she appeared topless on the cover, and inside the magazine there were 9 pages of interviews with her, along with a large poster of her completely naked. The March 1975 975 issue of Mayfair sold 460,000 copies, mostly to men. They called Eve the classic blonde. In a 9-page interview, she shared her preferences in love, admitting that she liked being submissive to a strict man. However, she stressed that she did not like being tied down or punished. She enjoyed seducing men and watching their excitement. She admitted that she often flirted and teased men, which made her feel happy. She also said that she liked both men and women. In the interview, she misled readers by saying that she lived alone with a cat, which sometimes made her feel sad and lonely. The nude photo shoot made Eve's boss, Victor Oberlans, very angry. He suspended her from her job as a waitress for 3 months, but she was not too worried about this. She was aware that she had violated her contract by working for Playboy's competitors. In a discussion with her manager, Aaron Morris, she confessed that her dream was to become a model and that she was doing everything she could to achieve that goal. She said that she did not want to serve rich men forever and was not afraid of losing her job as a waitress at the Playboy Club. She hoped that her appearance on the cover of Mayfair would lead to new job opportunities and help her advance her career. She believed that in the next 3 months, she would not need to return to the Playboy Club. Eve had no idea what was coming next. By then, her boyfriend, Tony's band, had completely disbanded. Although after moving to London, the group has performed as an opening act for famous bands such as Queen and T-Rex. But then, Tony and a friend, a former band member, had to work as forklift drivers. The other 2 members joined another band and left them. After Eve was suspended from her job, she spent the day in their rented apartment. Soon, she received 2 job offers, one for a photo shoot with a South African magazine and another as a model for a crime fiction magazine cover, in which she played a victim with a knife stuck in her throat. On Tuesday, March 18, 1975, Eve met with her manager. Then she visited a company that promoted stars on the BS Water show. At 15:50, she returned home by subway. On the way, she stopped at a flower shop and bought a bunch of dried flowers wrapped in a plastic bag. She arrived home around 4:10 p.m. About 20 minutes later, the neighbor downstairs heard a man and a woman talking in her apartment, and their conversation seemed calm. About an hour later, at 5:15 p.m., the downstairs neighbor suddenly heard a loud noise. She thought someone might have dropped a chair. Then she heard the sound of someone leaving Eve's apartment and coming down the stairs. Just 10 minutes later, Eve's boyfriend, Tony, returned home with a friend and discovered a horrifying scene. His girlfriend, Eve Stratford, was lying on a mattress in the bedroom. Her throat had been cut so deeply that her head was nearly severed from her body. Her hands were bound behind her with a scarf, and her ankles were tied with stockings. She was wearing a pink bra, panties, and a blue nylon housecoat that was open in the front. Tony immediately called the police. The officers and detectives who arrived described it as one of the most gruesome scenes they had ever encountered. Upon examining the apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating that Eve had likely let her attacker in. There were no signs of a struggle, and everything was in its usual place. The crime scene was filled with a disturbing, overpowering smell. Forensic experts later determined that she had been stabbed between 8 to 12 times in the neck. Additionally, they found semen from a strange man on her body. Police thoroughly searched the area around the house, including gardens, garbage bins, and drains, looking for evidence, but they did not find the murder weapon. The only thing they found was a torn magazine lying on the grass, with a picture of Eve on the cover. Detectives believe that the killer saw her picture in the magazine, found her address, and followed her to commit the terrible acts. Witnesses confirmed that Eve was walking alone from the metro station to her apartment, with the last person to see her being a neighbor. She was wearing a small hat and carrying a bag of dried flowers. The bouquet was found inside the apartment near the front door. There were drops of blood on the bag, proving that she had encountered the killer shortly after entering the house. Investigators noted that the dried flowers matched those in Eve's magazine photos. They also considered the possibility that the killer was a secret lover of Eva's, whom she had invited to her apartment. However, they considered this unlikely, as she knew that her boyfriend Tony could come home at any time. Based on witness accounts, a composite sketch of the suspect was created. Several people reported seeing an unknown man near her house. Witnesses described him as being between 30 and 40 years old, of average height, with a limp and a flushed face. One witness also said that the man had thick, curly black hair. Detectives interviewed two well-known celebrities who frequently interacted with Eve at the club. Their identities were not released, and there was no evidence to suggest they were involved in the crime. Waitresses from the club where Eve worked were also questioned, with some reporting receiving indecent phone calls the day before the tragedy. On the day of Eve's death, she received 3 mysterious phone calls. Each time she answered, there was silence on the other end, and then the call was disconnected. She had previously told friends that she felt she was being followed by a strange man near her home. She knew nothing about him, but remembered that his gait was tense and awkward. After the tragedy, Mayfair editor David Brenner refused to speak to the police. He only answered their questions by phone and claimed that he had never met Eve in person. Another individual involved in the case was Lebanese businessman Abdullah Kawaj, who dined at the Playboy Club daily. He had feelings for Eve and referred to her as his girlfriend. It is reported that they had a very close relationship and that Abdullah was involved in the criminal world. A waitress said that when she informed Abdullah of Eve's death, he cried at the table. He became one of the suspects, and this made him feel uncomfortable because people around him had discovered his secret relationship with Eve. A few months after Eve's murder, a man reported to the police that he had rented a flat to 2 people. When they moved out and he began cleaning, he found a newspaper clipping about Eve's murder in the closet. The clipping was stained with a woman's lipstick. He also found a photograph of Eve stabbed in several places with needles. Unfortunately, the evidence collected did not help the police solve the case. The murder weapon was never found, and as time passed, the likelihood of finding and punishing the perpetrator diminished. Eve's murder attracted a great deal of media attention. Londoners mourned her death, but there were also those who believed that she deserved it because of her promiscuous lifestyle. Some even showed their disdain by vandalizing her grave multiple times. Eve's parents were harassed with obscene phone calls, leading to a nervous breakdown for her mother, Liza. Meanwhile, on September 3, 1975, another girl, Lynn, was murdered in a different part of London. She was only 16 years old when the incident occurred. She was attacked from behind with a hard object to the head and then sexually assaulted. She was born on November 11, 1958. She was a good, diligent girl who had just graduated from high school and was planning to go to college to become a secretary. She was fluent in English, German, and French. On September 3, Lynn was returning home from a cafe where she had spent time with friends. She said goodbye to them around 11:00 p.m. and decided to take a shortcut through a dark alley. She had previously stated that she would never go into that area at night because she knew there were many homeless people there. However, that night, she decided to take a shortcut through that alley. Around 11:20 p.m., as she walked through the alley, she was struck on the head with a heavy object, likely a metal pipe, which resulted in a fractured skull. The attacker then threw her body over a fence into the grounds of an electrical substation to avoid detection. He assaulted she and left, leaving behind traces of his DNA on her body. The next morning, a local security officer discovered Lynn just a few minutes' walk from her home. When the scene was searched, no murder weapon was found. Despite her severe injuries, she was still alive but unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she died a week later. The police quickly launched an investigation and discovered a witness who was walking his dog around the time Lynn was attacked. He reported seeing a white man in the dark alley. Another witness mentioned seeing a man running through the alley. Although they all described the same individual, police were unable to find a suspect. Initially, police believed she was attacked by a friend of European origin. However, upon further investigation, they discovered that it was likely that her attacker had been stalking and lying in wait for her for several hours before carrying out the attack. Despite extensive investigation, police have not found any significant clues, and the case remains unsolved. On September 9, 1977, nearly 2 years after Lynn's death, another murder took place. 27 years old Elizabeth Paravincina was killed just 1.5 kilometers from where Lynn was attacked. Police immediately suspected that the two cases were related. Like Lynn, Elizabeth was walking home late at night on the same street, but in a slightly different direction. She was almost home when she was suddenly attacked from behind with a blunt object. He then dragged her body into the bushes. However, there were no signs of a struggle on her body. Police suspected that the perpetrator panicked about something, causing him to run away without leaving a trace. Witnesses reported a strange man in the area, and a composite sketch was created. But this did not help solve the case. Over time, several more crimes occurred with no suspects identified. Despite attempts to link the cases, only a few common features were found. By 2004, with the advancement of science and DNA testing, Eve's case was linked to Lynn's. The DNA from sperm found in both victims was identical, indicating they were attacked by the same man 6 months apart. Police now believe that both murders were committed by a serial killer who remains at large because his DNA is not in prison databases. The investigations into the cases of Eve and Lynn have been reopened. Police collected DNA samples from all suspects, including those who are deceased. For example, Abdullah's DNA was taken through his son, but no match was found. In 2015, on the 40th anniversary of Eve's murder, police appeared on television appealing for information and offering a $50,000 reward for information that could lead to the capture of her killer. Crucially, prior to 1995, DNA was not collected from people who had been in prison. This means that the perpetrator may have been arrested and imprisoned for other crimes before. It is possible that he shared information about his crimes with someone. Police have sought information from psychiatrists, inmates, and prison guards regarding the girls' murders. In 2020, former officer Chris Clark claimed that serial killer Peter Sutcliffe was responsible for at least 30 additional cold cases, including Eve's murder. In an exclusive interview shortly after Peter's death, Chris stated that while reviewing information on Peter's cases, he noticed many similarities in methods and motives. Peter was convicted in 1981 for 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. Before his arrest, he was married and worked as a truck driver, frequently traveling across England. It was discovered that he had been in the vicinity of Eve's home for a relative's wedding. The wedding took place on Saturday, March 22, 1975, just 4 days after Eve was murdered. At that time, Peter was 29 years old. Peter was in London during the week Lynn was killed. He was staying in a house in North London, about 6.5 kilometers from the site of Lynn's attack. Peter died in 2020 at the age of 74. Unfortunately, the police were unable to collect a full blood sample before his death. Currently, the national database only has swabs from his mouth and hair. His records indicate he is likely responsible for multiple attacks on women from 1969 to the 1980s. Aside from the 20 proven cases, The remaining cases are just police speculation. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Halseth. Sierra was a sweet young girl who loved spending time with her father, taking lots of pictures together. However, she burned those pictures and ran away with her boyfriend. She later blamed her father for everything, claiming that he had abused her. But was her words true? If so, why had no one heard of them before? Here is the full story of Sierra Halseth, her sudden change in behavior, and the tragic death of Daniel Halseth. Daniel Halseth was born in January 1976. He earned his bachelor's degree in music from Western Oregon University, where he was known for his drumming skills. He then pursued a degree in business, with the goal of becoming a successful businessman, and he eventually achieved that goal. At the age of 20, he met Elizabeth, the youngest woman ever elected to the Nevada State Senate. They got married in March 2001, which led Daniel to move to Nevada. The couple had 3 children: Dana, Jordan, and Sierra. They settled in Las Vegas because Daniel found a job there, but the family was not happy for a long time. 10 years after their wedding, Daniel and Elizabeth divorced. In October 2011, Daniel was arrested after Elizabeth accused him of trying to force her to have sex, even though they were still legally married. A month later, he filed for divorce, accusing Elizabeth of cheating on him. Sierra's siblings were still young when their parents divorced, but the family's troubles continued. Daniel and Elizabeth both remarried quickly. Despite this, Daniel and his ex-wife Elizabeth maintained their relationship for the sake of their children and even maintained a joint bank account. However, due to the constant instability, Elizabeth began a custody battle that lasted until Sierra started high school. Eventually, Dana and Jordan moved in with Elizabeth, while Sierra stayed with Daniel. The father and daughter have a close bond, and Daniel often shares photos of him and Sierra having fun together on social media, showing his love for his youngest daughter. In June 2020, Sierra began dating 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, who was 2 years her senior. Unlike typical high school relationships, their relationship progressed quickly. They began making alarming plans for the future, including robbing their parents and running away to California. Both sets of parents quickly noticed negative changes in Sierra and Aaron's behavior, fearing that the situation would worsen if the kids spent time together. Unfortunately, the parents' worries and concerns led the couple to make poor choices. By Christmas 2020, Aaron and Sierra's families decided that the young couple should stop dating, and they were officially banned from dating. While it may seem like Sierra and Aaron are following their parents' wishes, that is not the case. Sierra and Aaron quietly waited for the right moment to carry out their plan of revenge against their families. Their goal was to eliminate their parents who had hindered their relationship. On December 16, 2020, Sierra's father, Daniel, wrote a heartfelt post for her birthday, expressing his love for her. He shared that when he was 9 years old, he dreamed of having a big family and always wanted to be a great father. He expressed his happiness that he had fulfilled that dream, especially because he had Sierra. Little did he know that Sierra was plotting to kill him at the time. On April 3, 2021, Daniel shared an old video online of him and his daughter having fun together, saying that they were enjoying their time. 5 days later, Sierra ran away from home. That same day, another unusual thing happened. $1,300 was withdrawn from her parents' joint bank account without any notice. Elizabeth found this strange because Daniel would never withdraw such a large amount of money without informing her, Elizabeth sent Daniel a text message, but he did not respond all day. By this point, many people, including Elizabeth and his mother, Christina, were worried because Daniel had stopped answering his phone. Elizabeth then texted her daughter, Sierra, to ask how Daniel was doing. Surprisingly, Sierra replied that Daniel's phone was broken, but he was fine. However, Daniel's family grew increasingly concerned. They knew he could use his laptop to communicate, and if his phone was broken, he could fix it quickly. Daniel regularly posting videos on Instagram and sharing his thoughts on Twitter with many followers. His mother was aware of this, so his sudden silence was concerning to her. She asked a family friend to check if Daniel was at home. The family friend contacted Sierra to find out where her father was. Sierra replied that he was in the shower. The friend then asked why Daniel wasn't answering his phone. Sierra explained that her phone was broken. She assured the family friend that she would have her father call back from another phone as soon as he finished showering. However, that didn't happen, and the next day, Sierra stopped answering calls and texts. Christina's increasingly concerned when Sierra did not respond to her texts. Concerned, she decided to call her niece, but Sierra only said that her father was in the shower. In a fit of rage, Christina threatened to call the police, causing Sierra to stop answering her phone altogether. That day, surveillance footage showed Daniel's blue Nissan leaving the area, causing Christina to become even more concerned. She continued to call on Wednesday, debating whether to contact the police or have Peggy and Joey come over. Eventually, Sierra stopped answering her phone altogether. Meanwhile, Joey and Peggy, Daniel's landlords and close friends, were on their way, but they informed Christina that it would take a few hours for them to arrive because they were out of town. Christina was so worried that she decided to call 911 to report that her son, Daniel, had been missing for 2 days. Daniel had been absent from work, and friends and family had been unable to reach him. Christina noted that Daniel was not usually like this. He lived with his daughter, who was also not returning calls or texts. The most worrying detail was that money had been withdrawn from Daniel's account at 3 different ATMs. Police were then dispatched to the address, but Joe and Peggy had already arrived. When Joey and Peggy arrived at Daniel's house, they found the front door open and Daniel's car gone. They cautiously walked inside and immediately smelled a strong smell of smoke. They searched every room in the house, but found only the remains of a fire. There was no sign of Daniel. However, things took a turn for the worse when they entered the garage. In the middle of the garage, they saw a sleeping bag with something inside. Upon inspection, they discovered Daniel's body, burned beyond recognition. Joey quickly called the police and told them they were the homeowners. They had just arrived and discovered that a fire had broken out in the house 2 days earlier. Joey also mentioned that he had seen a body in a sleeping bag in the garage. A few minutes later, the police arrived at their address. During their investigation, they confirmed that Daniel, 45, had been brutally murdered. The forensic team discovered a significant amount of shocking evidence in Daniel's home. First, they found a chainsaw carelessly left on the living room floor. In the kitchen, there was another saw with blood smeared along its edge, and 2 knives were found in the sink. The police also located a receipt from a store and an ATM. Despite signs of a fire in the living room and the bloody saw in the kitchen, it was evident that someone had made serious efforts to clean the house. Daniel's autopsy revealed a gruesome scene. He had suffered 70 slash wounds. Most of these injuries were to his head, neck, and torso. His body, burned beyond recognition, was stuffed into a sleeping bag and moved to the garage. Police concluded that the person responsible for Daniel's death harbored intense hatred, as evidenced by the brutal stabbing and beating he endured. After he died, the attacker even burned his body in the living room. When the police spoke to the family, it was clear that there were no obvious suspects. No one could understand why Daniel had such a vicious enemy. However, Christina noted that Sierra had been acting very strangely. When asked about Daniel's situation, she always replied that her father was taking a shower. And then Sierra stopped contacting Christina completely. Additionally, Sierra had gone missing from the house. On April 9, police received a tip that led them to a receipt from a local store and access to surveillance camera footage. They discovered that Aaron had purchased a saw and gloves. That same day, Sierra was seen in the footage leaving the store with 2 bottles of bleach, using Daniel's credit card to make the purchase. Police quickly gathered information about Aaron. They learned that both families had forbidden Aaron and Sierra from seeing each other, so he ran away from home on April 8. With the addition of surveillance footage, police had enough evidence to issue arrest warrants for them. On April 13, police arrested Sierra and Aaron 400 miles from their home in Salt Lake City, Utah, for not paying their bus fare. When police conducted a background check, they discovered that the couple was wanted for murder. Additionally, police discovered Daniel's blue Nissan, the car Sierra and Aaron had used to get away. Inside the trunk, they found a bloody blanket. Police seized Sierra and Aaron's phones as evidence. They examined the contents and found a disturbing video on Sierra's phone. In the video, Sierra and Aaron talked about killing Daniel without showing any remorse. After Sierra and Aaron were arrested in Utah, they were taken to the Clark County Detention Center in Nevada. The investigation at the crime scene revealed that Sierra and Aaron intended to dismember Daniel, as a chainsaw and a handsaw were discovered in the house and had been recently purchased for that purpose. As a result, Sierra and Aaron face multiple charges, including murder, arson, conspiracy to commit robbery, and 4 counts of fraudulent use of a credit or debit card. On June 15, 2021, Sierra and Aaron pleaded not guilty at their initial hearing. The case has attracted attention, especially because Sierra seems to have no remorse for her actions against her father. Many were shocked by her seeming indifference. Sierra's defense said her parents' divorce and the long custody battle had a significant impact on Sierra. The therapist then explained that this type of trauma can significantly disrupt a child's development. If Sierra had previously experienced emotional trauma, any change or loss could have added to her feelings of despair. Daniel's family has stated that Sierra and Aaron's complete lack of remorse is reprehensible and inexcusable. They expect justice to be served in the most serious manner. They loved Daniel deeply and miss him. This will be their only statement. In May 2022, Sierra Halseth and Aaron Guerrero agreed to a plea deal. However, it is unclear whether the couple truly felt remorse or whether they agreed to the plea deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. The judge sentenced Sierra and Aaron to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. This was part of the deal they made when they pleaded guilty to murder and other charges. After 22 years, they could be released around the age of 40, which would give them a chance to start over. After the verdict, Daniel's mother, Christina, spoke to the press, expressing her grief. Christina said that Sierra had shown no remorse for the murder she had committed. In fact, during the trial, Sierra tried to blame Daniel, claiming that she had been forced into the act. Sierra said that her father had assaulted her, pinned her down, and beat her. However, Christina pointed out that Sierra could have reported the incident to the police, but instead chose a different and more tragic course of action. In a surprising turn of events, Aaron was the only one to apologize for his actions. He sought forgiveness from Daniel's family, who noticed that Aaron showed remorse and emotion, unlike Sierra. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lydia Guardo. Raymond Guardo married Jacqueline in 1956. In the early years of their marriage, they had two children, a son named Bruno and a daughter named Nadia. At first, their family appeared to be typical and happy. However, after Nadia's birth, Raymond was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While Raymond was in prison, his wife Jacqueline began an affair with another man and became pregnant. When she was allowed to visit him in prison, she informed him that the child was not his. Despite this, he tolerated his wife's infidelity and expressed his desire to adopt the child. Soon, on November 13, 1960, the girl was born, named Lydia Guardo. Years later, Raymond was released from prison, but his relationship with his wife Jacqueline has worsened. She was left alone to care for their 3 children and seemed to have little affection for them. So she decided to send her children to an orphanage, and soon after, her children were adopted by a family. Fortunately, the children were placed with a loving family that provided them with everything they needed to begin a new chapter in their lives. With this support, Bruno, the oldest child, always held onto the hope that his biological parents would come for him and his younger sisters. He even encouraged his sisters to believe that this would happen one day. While still in prison, Raymond saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a woman named Lucienne Ulpat, who was seeking a pen pal. After his release, he found Lucienne and soon married her. Following the marriage, he became determined to reclaim his children by any means. One night, he took a gun and broke into the home of the family that was taking care of his children. The noise frightened the girls. Nadia didn't remember what her father, Raymond, looked like, and Lydia had never seen him before. They thought he might be a kidnapper and were worried that they might be in danger. Raymond successfully took the children from their foster family and placed them in his car, despite their threats to call the police. After several hours of driving, he brought the children to his home, where he introduced them to Lucienne, telling them that she was their new mother and that they would need to follow her rules. During the first years of living together, everything seemed quite stable, at least judging by family photos from the time. The family moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood. Raymond received a cash allowance and started his own business, which focused on instant postcard printing and various office tasks. Lucienne occasionally worked in his company, but primarily handled office work. However, as time passed, the family's life began to change dramatically. The children suffered abuse from their father, Raymond, and stepmother, Lucienne. Lydia's first memory from this period was witnessing Raymond beat Bruno for playing with a neighbor's child. When Raymond and Lucienne went to work, they hired young girls to care for the children. Upon returning home, he would pressure these girls to drink alcohol with him. On one occasion, he even attempted to persuade one of the girls to have sex, but she managed to escape. The girl's father then came to the house to confront Raymond and seriously injured him. After that incident, Raymond stopped hiring nannies. Later, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the beach. Once they arrived, they spent time swimming and relaxing like other vacationers. However, an unsettling event occurred. While in the water, Raymond approached his daughter, Nadia, and pressed her against him inappropriately. She struggled to escape his grip, but this only made things worse. From that point on, she became the target of Raymond's abuse. Lydia recalls one day, she heard Nadia's cries coming from the trailer. This marked the beginning of Raymond's sexual abuse of one of his daughters. After that, parents, Raymond and Lucienne, often beat and do other terrible things to their children. Bruno and Nadia stopped going to elementary school, while Lydia, who had never been to school, faced severe mistreatment. This may have been because she was not Raymond's biological daughter. A few years later, around 1971, when Lydia was over 8 years old, the bullying began to get worse. The first incident occurs when Lucienne gets angry because Lydia comes home dirty after playing outside. Her stepmother, Lucienne, put her in a bathtub filled with boiling water and bleach. She recalls that her sensitive skin began to peel and float to the surface of the water. Hearing her screams, Raymond rushed into the bathroom, pulled she out, and laid her on the bed. He attempted to treat her burns with vegetable oil, but soon realized the injuries were severe. Then, she was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined she had third-degree burns. So that Lucienne wouldn't be responsible for the incident, Raymond blamed the city government for providing too hot water. Meanwhile, Lydia was transferred to the intensive care unit and then to the burns unit at the Lion City Hospital, where she remained for several months. She also underwent several skin grafts. Raymond is always by Lydia's side, not because he was a good father, but just to keep her from sharing the incident with others. Eventually, he grew weary of the situation and declared that he would take she home to continue her treatment. Medical professionals were against this decision, but Raymond secured the support of their family doctor, who wrote a confirming that he would continue to treat Lydia. Consequently, Raymond picked Lydia up and carried her out of the burn unit. Back home, Raymond begins to take care of Lydia. He regularly changed her dressings and started to touch her inappropriately. One day, he came home with a camera, claiming he needed to take pictures for the insurance company. He first photographed Lydia, asking her to smile, and then took pictures of her private areas. He then told the girl that the family doctor had prescribed this medicine. He forced her to inhale that drug, leaving her in a semi-conscious state. Although she was aware that he was about to do something strange and painful, she was unable to resist. At that time, he was sexually assaulting she. During this time, Raymond's wife, Lucienne, did not intervene. Instead, she encouraged his behavior. For 9 years, Lydia came to see what was happening as normal. She believed her father, Raymond, loved her, which led her to think there was nothing wrong with his actions. Years later, in an interview with a French television show, Lydia explained how Raymond justified his horrific actions. He told his children that he was doing this for their well-being. He also claimed that, as their father, he had the right to do so. In 1975, the Guardo family moved to the village of Coulombe, about 40 kilometers from Paris. At their new home, Raymond and Lucienne continued to abuse their children. The teenagers still did not attend school and had very little contact with the outside world. After returning to work, Raymond managed to get permission to park his printing van at a shopping center. To attract attention, he displayed photos of Lydia's burned legs on the van. Next to the photos, there were posters announcing that Lydia's injuries were due to the negligence of the authorities, and that they had yet to compensate her. Thus, he created the image of a father, calling for public attention and justice. When he felt that the photos alone weren't enough, Raymond forced Lydia to accompany him so that people could see her scars. He used the sympathy of bystanders to sell his goods and make money. Bruno was the first to try to stop the abuse from Raymond and Lucienne. Before that, Bruno, Nadia, and Lydia tried to escape, but they were caught and punished. Despite this, Bruno, who had suffered years of physical abuse, eventually managed to escape. According to some sources, Bruno contacted the authorities to report his family's problem. However, the authorities did not take his claims seriously. Meanwhile, his younger sisters, Nadia and Lydia, continued to suffer from Raymond's behavior. As they grew older, their bodies began to change. Noticing this, Raymond bandaged his daughters' chests with elastic bandages, making it difficult for them to breathe. The bandages eventually became tattered and dirty, as he did not allow them to be removed for months. He did not want anyone other than himself to touch his daughters. Years later, Bruno returned to rescue his sister Nadia, who was now an adult. He successfully saved her, but Lydia remained in danger. Raymond confined her to the dark, damp attic, where he abused her multiple times a day. She felt betrayed by her siblings for leaving her behind. She tried to escape from home several times, but Raymond spread rumors that she was mentally ill. So every time she tried to contact the authorities, they immediately brought her back home. After another escape attempt, Raymond even chained her up to keep her from fleeing again. When Lydia turned 18, Raymond decided it was time for her to have children. He was so determined to make this happen that after each intimate encounter, he would tie her legs together to supposedly increase the chances of her getting pregnant. At 19, she became pregnant for the first time, and for almost the entire 9 months of her pregnancy, she was kept on a leash. This was to prevent her from having an abortion. She gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. Despite becoming a mother, Lydia continued to try to escape, but Raymond caught her repeatedly and punished her harshly. On one occasion, he locked her in the attic for 6 months. During this time, she suffered abuse from Raymond and Lucienne, who often used kitchen utensils as weapons. The only companions she had were rats. She went on to have 5 more children between 1986 and 1996. Her youngest child, a boy named Rudy, is not Raymond's but someone else's, conceived while she was trying to escape. Raymond took great pride in his children, who initially did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbors, grocery store owners, and authorities representatives all came to congratulate him on having a large family and pay their respects. Every time Lydia was ready to give birth, Raymond would take her to a hospital outside the border. There, with threats to kill her, he would force her to say that he was her husband and the father of her children. He was skilled at manipulating and she felt powerless to resist him. It all ended in 1999. Raymond, who was diabetic, began to suffer serious health issues due to his neglect of his well-being. One day, his condition deteriorated, resulting in the amputation of several toes on his left foot. After the surgery, he continued to ignore the doctor's advice, and his health condition worsened. One day, Lydia visited Raymond in the hospital and learned that he had died the night before from a pulmonary embolism. This news brought her to tears, as she seemed to forget all the pain he had caused her. Before the death of the man who had abused her for a long time, she could not understand why she felt so sad. As Lydia left the hospital, she recalled how Raymond once forced her to promise that she would end her life immediately after his death. Years of his control had deeply affected her mindset. She walked to the nearest bridge and, in a moment of despair, jumped into the river. After she fell, she lost consciousness. Then, rescuers had pulled her from the water. In that moment, she realized that the horrors of her past were finally behind her. Thus, the 28-year saga of bullying, sexual assault, and imprisonment ended. She was free at last. After Lydia was released, she faced many challenges. As an illiterate and unemployed young woman, she needed to rebuild her life. She also had to reconnect with her children, who had been raised by Raymond and Lucienne without any contact with her. Fortunately, after years of neglecting the issue, the authorities began to support her. Initially, she was allowed to stay in the house where she had been held captive, although she was too afraid to go into the attic, the site of her abuse. Lydia's stepmother, Lucienne, who was 68 at the time, went to trial in 2007. She received a 3-year suspended sentence for failing to stop the crimes committed by Raymond. In 2008, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years probation. Lydia bravely shared her story with everyone. Despite still being illiterate, she collaborated with journalists and writer Jean-Michel Radem to publish a book about her difficult journey to freedom. In her book, Lydia criticized many government agencies. According to her, during the days when she escaped, they made her fall back into a bad situation without trying to understand the situation. She was especially critical of her stepmother, Lucienne, who not only ignored her suffering, but also actively participated in the physical abuse. She also criticized Bruno, Nadia, and medical workers who treated her injuries from burns, bruises, and cuts. She claims that medical staff ignored the obvious signs of her mistreatment and chose to remain uninvolved. Additionally, she criticizes her neighbors for not contacting any social services despite hearing the daily screams of children. Finally, Lydia expressed her disappointment with the French justice system for going easy on Lucienne. After publishing her book, the public became aware of the horrors she endured. Though some people advised her against sharing her story, she firmly believes that victims of such crimes should share their experiences, as it may help protect others. After gaining her freedom, Lydia met Sylvain Skurla. He seemed to come into her life to help heal her from the pain she had suffered. Shortly after they met, they got married and had 2 children. She expressed that she found hope in her husband and began to embrace life again. She participated in several media interviews and documentaries about her experiences, with Sylvain always by her side. However, the indelible traces of her time in captivity still remained in her heart. The scars on her body were a reminder of her past and the struggles she had gone through. With the help of a lawyer, Lydia appealed to the Judicial Commission for compensation. In her appeal, she detailed the torture and abuse she endured from Raymond and Lucienne, as well as her lack of access to education, which hindered her ability to find work. Additionally, she was not registered in the Social Security system because she could not write, preventing her from completing necessary forms. She also mentioned that burns she suffered as a child resulted in a degree of disability. Therefore, it was essential for Lydia to achieve several goals. First, to have her status as a victim recognized. Second, to receive financial assistance from the state to buy a home, ensuring she would never return to the place where she was tortured. On November 16, 2009, the Victims' Compensation Commission awarded Lydia over $100,000 in compensation. Her children, whom she had with Raymond, also received financial support. It was reported that they all found stable jobs, rebuilt their lives, and started their own families. Now, at 61 years old, Lydia has had a long and challenging journey to achieve a happy life. She needed specialized treatment for her emotional and physical scars for many years. However, with Sylvain's support, she was able to begin again. Despite everything she has gone through, she remains a strong and cheerful woman. Later, Lydia re-established communication with Bruno and Nadia. However, she admits that she still feels anger towards Bruno for not taking her with him. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jorge Torres. Is there anything more horrific than a father murdering his own child? In the investigation and trial of crimes, mistakes in identifying the culprit can have dire consequences. One of the most heartbreaking situations is when an innocent person is wrongfully punished while the real culprit continues to be at large. This was on Mother's Day, when 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias, decided to go for a short bike ride. They were expected to return within an hour, but vanished without a trace. Family members spent nearly the entire night looking for them. In the early morning, Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, found her bike while climbing the hill, but Laura was still missing. The search for she and her friend continued. A couple of hours later, a few hundred meters from the bike, Jerry discovers suspicious figures lying motionless on the ground in the dim light of early morning. He quickly realized something was wrong. When they reached the scene, he discovered the bodies of Laura and her best friend Crystal, who had multiple stab wounds. It was clear that their deaths were brutal and prolonged. Sadly, this tragedy happened close to their home. Both girls lived in the small town of Xene, Illinois, which has a population of 20,000. Their deaths deeply affected the local community, sparking a desire among residents to uncover the truth and the cruel criminal responsible. However, it's difficult to uncover the full story. The police came under intense public pressure, so they worked hard to gather any information that could help them inform the community and capture the perpetrator. A few days after the tragedy, the commander of the task force at the Lake County Major Crimes Department confirmed that has a suspect. Detectives had already spoken with Jerry. They think he is involved in the case. He was brought in for questioning on the day the bodies were discovered. The police noted that Jerry had been acting strangely. A background check revealed that he had been released from a Texas prison just a month prior. Overall, he had a significant history of legal troubles. Although Jerry had repaired his relationship with his daughter, could he handle the situation involving her and her friend? The girls were discovered lying next to each other, having been raped. The scene was horrific. Both had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been beaten. A forensic expert identified a total of 31 cuts from a blade, primarily on the upper body, chest, and neck. The injuries were similar for both girls. Laura had defensive wounds, suggesting she fought back in desperation. There was reason to believe that the killer intentionally caused maximum pain to his victims, targeting areas that would prolong suffering rather than lead to immediate death. Jerry firmly denied any wrongdoing. Consequently, he was questioned for hours by law enforcement officers who sought to piece together the events leading to the deaths of the two victims. After a lengthy interrogation, the detectives managed to obtain a confession, which was captured on video. Jerry said he and his wife Sheila returned home on Sunday around 3 o'clock. At that time, their 4 children were flying kites by the lake. Their daughter Laura asked her parents if she could go for a bike ride with a friend, mentioning that it was Mother's Day and she wanted to celebrate it with a festive ride. Even though Laura was still under house arrest for taking $40 from Jerry, Sheila chose to let her go. Jerry disagreed with Sheila, believing that Laura should complete her punishment to understand her mistake. However, Sheila convinced him, and Jerry decided not to interfere, he wanting to ensure that both Laura and Sheila had a nice Mother's Day. Laura was allowed to go for a walk and was expected to return in an hour. However, she did not come back on time. Initially, her parents thought she and her friends had lost track of time while enjoying themselves and would return soon. But as evening approached and Laura still hadn't arrived home, their concern grew. The path through the park was short, and it usually took about 20 minutes to walk. Given that she had been gone for several hours, her absence became increasingly worrying. Jerry decided to investigate. He planned to search for his daughter along the path and intended to discipline her for disobeying, so he set off down a dirt road. Jerry encountered Laura and Crystal, who were playing and ignoring their parents' requests. Upset, Jerry insisted it was time for his daughter to go home and said he would punish her. He wanted to take Laura home and told Crystal to go back as well since her parents were waiting for her. However, neither girl was willing to leave on their own. Jerry then turned to Laura and said they were leaving because she was too caught up in her play. Laura reacted by getting upset, and Jerry grabbed her hand. She resisted and screamed to be let go. Crystal also pleaded with him to release her friend and leave them alone. Both girls started to be disrespectful and rude to Jerry. When Jerry refused to let go of Laura's hand, Crystal pulled out a small switchblade and insisted that he release her. In a moment of confusion, Laura bit her father's hand, which made him angry. He struck her in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. Crystal then lunged at him, but he easily took the knife away from her. Once he had control, he hit Crystal in the face, and she also fell. Furious, Crystal stood up and attacked Jerry, but he responded by stabbing her in the chest several times. Afterward, he approached Laura, who was desperately trying to defend herself, but she was no match for him. He struck her in the face again, and then stabbed her multiple times with the knife. Jerry's statements were collected after 24 hours of interrogation. The police believed they had caught the real criminal. He detailed the brutal aspects of the attack, information only the perpetrator would know. Despite his confession, it was hard to accept that a father could harm his own daughter and her friend so viciously. The detectives were particularly suspicious due to Jerry's criminal history. Born in 1970, Jerry Hobbs dropped out of school after 8th grade. He was known for his hot temper, which often led him into trouble. His criminal career began soon after school, with significant offenses occurring in 1990, when he first served several months in a Texas state prison. After that point, he was released but then re-imprisoned, typically for petty offenses. The list of criminal activities included possession of illegal substances and multiple assaults on individuals for theft. There were serious underlying issues that contributed to these crimes. In August 2001, Jerry attacked his wife while they were living in a trailer. The situation escalated into physical violence. 3 neighbors attempted to intervene, but Jerry, in a fit of rage, grabbed a chainsaw and chased them around the trailer park. He only stopped when one of the men struck him in the back with a shovel, causing him to fall and become incapacitated. By that time, the police had been called, and they arrived shortly after to take control of the situation. In December 2002, he was convicted and received a suspended sentence. However, he failed to report to his probation officer, leading to the revocation of his probation. In October 2003, he was sent to prison, where he served 18 months. He was finally released in April 2005. After his release, he took a bus to Zane. He visited Sheila's parents' house, where he reunited with Sheila and their 4 children. Laura and her 2 brothers were from Jerry's relationship with Sheila, while her eldest child was from her previous marriage. Jerry put aside past grievances and hoped to rebuild their relationship and live together as a family again. Jerry spent a lot of time reflecting over the past year and a half, dreaming of starting a new life. Despite the challenges in their relationship, Sheila genuinely loved Jerry, and they decided to give their relationship another chance. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Just a month after they reunited, a tragic incident occurred. One day began positively, with children riding bicycles and roller skates along the forest path. Many families were having barbecues, making the area lively and seemingly safe. There had never been any incidents in the past, and parents often allowed their children to explore on their own. It was puzzling that no one seemed to have heard anything. There were no witnesses to the double murder. After Jerry confessed, the police arrested him, and he was held in custody without bail for over 2 years while the prosecution prepared for trial. During the investigation, several strange inconsistencies came to light. Investigative agency found it hard to believe that the 8- and 9-year-old girls had a knife and attacked him, prompting him to fight back and ultimately kill them in a moment of anger. Additionally, it was odd that the girls refused to go home after their father found them walking alone in the dark. Were the schoolgirls really not afraid to be outside at that hour? All of this seemed absurd. In his confession, Jerry did not mention anything about rape, even though the girls had experienced sexual violence at the crime scene. Forensic evidence later uncovered more details about the terrible events that occurred that day. Scientists found male DNA samples, but these did not match Jerry. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. Despite this evidence, investigators proposed their own explanation. However, they did not explain how male DNA could be found on the girls, making their reasoning seem even more questionable. The charges indicate that it was a serious case. They had Jerry's confession and his criminal background, so winning in court seemed like a formality. Details about the DNA evidence were not revealed. The video recordings of the interrogations were sufficient to persuade the jury. As a result, Laura's father was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2009, a significant change occurred in Arlington, Virginia. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old servicewoman, lived there. On July 13, 2009, she failed to report for her shift at Fort Myer, raising concerns among her supervisors. Amanda was typically responsible and committed to her career, so not showing up for duty without notice was out of character for her. To check on her well-being, management sent several colleagues to her dormitory. They knocked on her door, rang the doorbell, and attempted to reach her by phone, but received no response. When they found her door unlocked, they entered the room. The first alarming sign was that her wallet and ID were untouched. The military quickly discovered blood and signs of a robbery in the bedroom. Amanda's body was found in the closet. She had been severely beaten, and a cord from a household appliance was still tied around her neck, with a pillowcase over her head. Investigators determined that she had died about 2 days before her body was discovered. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene, including a sample of the pillowcase. The police noted that her laptop, phone, and bed sheets were missing, and they found several footprints in the room, suggesting that another person had been present. Since the base was secured against outsiders, this indicated that the perpetrator likely lived or worked there. Forensic experts identified the shoe prints as Nike Air Force One, which were very popular on the base at the time, providing no leads for the police in their search for the suspect. Months went by. On February 27, 2010, another attack occurred just 5 kilometers from Amanda's workplace in Arlington. In the early hours of the morning, 2 female postgraduate students were returning from dinner when a man confronted them at the entrance of their building. He threatened them with a weapon, forced them inside, and followed them with his gun drawn. He bound their hands with electrical cords and ordered one of them to get into his car. He then drove her to a remote area outside the city, where he raped her. The attacker strangled her until she lost consciousness and left her to die in a wooded area covered in snow, not considering that she might survive the assault. The girl regained her senses and made her way to the nearest road, where a motorist found her and offered help. He stopped and called emergency services. The student, suffering from hypothermia, was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, her friend had also contacted the authorities. Fortunately, they did not find any immediate danger. After being discharged, she spoke with the police and provided valuable information to the investigators. The most significant breakthrough was her detailed description of the attacker and his car. She described him as a short, smooth-skinned Hispanic man who drove a silver car. Detectives quickly recognized that the handwriting matched that of the criminal who attacked Amanda. Additionally, the police had obtained DNA from the person who attempted to take the girl's life. That her miraculous rescue would set off a series of events that would significantly impact many lives. Later that evening, officers collected a DNA sample from Amanda's. In the car described by the girl, they discovered the university ID of the kidnapped girl along with her earring, which helped establish a connection between the main suspect and the attack. The main suspect has since been taken into custody while awaiting trial. Several months went by as the police worked to understand the details of these disturbing events. Eventually, the DNA sample was analyzed and matched with the National Criminal Database. Law enforcement officials were taken aback by an unexpected discovery. The DNA found on the bodies of Laura and Crystal, who were murdered in 2005 in Zane, matched that of this suspect. At the time of the girls' murders, the suspect, Jorge Torres, was just 16 years old and lived in Zane. The police were further shocked to find out that he was a friend of Crystal's older brother. This investigation into the brutal attack revealed a shocking miscarriage of justice. Jerry, the father of Laura, was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. After spending many years in prison, Jerry began to show significant changes in his behavior. 2 weeks after DNA evidence linked Jorge to the crime, police identified the true killer of the 2 schoolgirls. The charges against Jerry were dropped, and he was released from prison in early August 2010. After the murders of the schoolgirls, Jorge was not apprehended and graduated from high school in 2006. Just a few months later, he enlisted in the Marines. The investigation revealed that he had boasted about being part of the Marines, an important unit of the U.S. Armed Forces. But this did not help his criminal image. He remained a ruthless monster and continued his violent actions. Now, it was necessary to examine his potential involvement in other attacks. When in prison, Jorge was still scheming and manipulating events. But the manipulative tactics Jorge used could no longer be hidden. Alongside the DNA testing, additional evidence was necessary to prove his involvement in the murder of the schoolgirls. To gather this evidence, authorities decided to recruit informants from among the prisoners in exchange for reduced sentences. A suitable informant was chosen. He was a former restaurant owner convicted of financial crimes and had no prior violent crime record. He willingly agreed to cooperate with the police. During a week in August 2010, he was approached to communicate with Jorge. This person said, in his confession, Jorge stated that he entered Amanda's apartment in the early morning with the intention of robbing and assaulting her. When Amanda woke up and saw him, he took advantage of her shock, tying her hands with a wire and wrapping a cord around her neck because he feared she would recognize him and report him to the police. Jorge claimed that she had no time to fight back. He coldly detailed how he assaulted Amanda while she was suffering, and then concealed her body in a closet to delay its discovery. The informant reported that Jorge spoke about his actions with a sense of pride, almost bragging, law enforcement officers were shocked. Jorge's behavior indicated possible psychopathic traits, as individuals with such disorders often seek admiration. Following this confession, the police chose to reopen Amanda's case. They discovered that Jorge was a colleague of Amanda and lived directly across the hall from her. In his room, officers found a gun and a computer containing numerous graphic videos of the rape and torture of women. Additionally, Jorge was wearing Nike Air Force One sneakers that matched the shoe prints at the scene of Amanda's murder. Forensic scientists started re-examining samples from the pillowcase found on Amanda's head and from the bedsheet. DNA testing eventually revealed a match, adding one more victim to the list of crimes linked to this dangerous criminal. Although detectives believed he might be involved in other similar offenses, they found no evidence to support this. The police were left with a serious threat to society who had been free for years. It was finally time to pursue justice. The trial of the case in which the graduate student victim survived the attack began in December 2010. The defendant was found guilty of several charges, including kidnapping, rape, and attempted first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison. This was just the beginning of multiple trials. The trial for the murder of Amanda Snell began in 2014, after prosecutors presented Jorge's recorded confession and DNA evidence. The jury unanimously supported the prosecution. In late May of that year, the judge sentenced Jorge to death. In mid-November, he was extradited to Lake County, Illinois, to face trial for the murders of Laura and Crystal. Although the attacker had already been sentenced to death, the state attorney believed it was essential to conduct hearings to honor the victims and their families. The trial started in mid-September 2018. Jorge opted for a plea deal, giving up his right to a trial and admitting to the intentional murders of 2 schoolgirls. He received a 50-year prison sentence for each murder, but his life sentence was already revoked. He returned to a Virginia prison to await the death penalty while his appeals were under review. The death penalty was abolished in the state in 2021, so Jorge is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. One key question remains: why would the biological father of one of the murdered schoolgirls take the blame for this terrible crime? In 2005, Jerry briefly explained his reasoning to his mother, stating that he had been broken by the police during interrogation. Later, after his release, he shared more details with journalists. He revealed that he had not slept for over a day and was actively searching for his daughter with Crystal's father when he learned of her death. Overwhelmed by shock, he was confused and in pain, and the police exploited this vulnerability during the lengthy interrogation to extract his shocking confession. Human rights activists claimed that Jerry faced constant pressure from law enforcement, who used various tactics to force him into a confession. As a result of their actions, Jerry lost 5 years of his life in prison. After these events, the man decided to seek compensation for moral damages because he now knows that the police deliberately ignored the most valuable evidence that confirmed his innocence and locked him up instead of looking for the real killer. DNA samples obtained after the rape clearly showed that Jerry was not involved in the crime, yet law enforcement chose not to pursue the real culprit and continued to charge him. Now, it took multiple crimes being committed for the truth to finally come to light and for an innocent man to be set free. During the recent press conference regarding this incident, the state attorney addressed the media. He made efforts to downplay the situation and stressed that no one obstructed the detainees' access to legal counsel. He claimed that the detainees' rights were fully respected during questioning. According to him, Jerry's own behavior raised suspicions, and his past criminal record further damaged his credibility, leading the police to suspect his involvement in the girls' deaths. Detectives believed he had knowledge relevant to the case and continued to press him for answers, but Jerry maintained that this was merely an unfortunate coincidence. A few hours into the interrogation, the police took away Jerry's clothes, claiming they needed to analyze them. Instead, they gave him a thin suit that left him cold. They repeatedly showed him disturbing photographs from the murder scene and intimidated him with threats. Although Jerry consistently refused to confess, the police began threatening to arrest Sheila, suggesting that their children would be left without parents. He couldn't let that happen. To obtain a confession that could be used in court, they needed to record it on video. There was supposed to be no coercion or aggression from the officers, but many takes were necessary because Jerry initially refused to read the confession prepared by the investigator. Ultimately, the threats led him to comply with the detectives' demands. In February 2014, the civil lawsuit of a wrongfully convicted man was resolved, resulting in an award of over $6 million. However, he does not view this as a true victory. He emphasizes the importance of the wrongful conviction, which led to reforms in Lake County's law enforcement system. He notes that while he was imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, the actual killer continued to rape and murder other victims. Fortunately, that killer is now in prison and can no longer harm anyone. Police believe he is a serial killer, and it's likely that there were additional victims. An investigation into other cases of forced confessions revealed that 4 more innocent men were also wrongfully convicted. DNA evidence cleared them, but this crucial information was ignored by the Lake County prosecutor at the time. These 4 men spent a total of 75 years in prison and are now free. The case of Jorge Torres serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of violent crime and the long road to justice for victims and their families. Jorge's crimes, which include the brutal murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias in 2005, as well as the subsequent murder of Amanda Snell in 2009, went unsolved for years, leaving a trail of pain and confusion in their wake. His eventual conviction, made possible by DNA evidence, not only exonerated Jerry Hobbs, who was wrongfully imprisoned for the murders of the two young girls, but also revealed the extent of Jorge's crimes. The case underscores the vital role that forensic science plays in ensuring justice and preventing wrongful convictions, and serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of thorough investigations in the pursuit of the truth. Thanks to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of DNA testing, justice was finally served, although the damage done to the lives and spirits of those affected remains irreparable. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Dina Thompson. In the summer of 2022, the British media reported the release of one of the country's most dangerous criminals, 61-year-old Dina Thompson, known as the Black Widow. Today, I'll explain how she became infamous across the UK and why some people still fear her. Dina was born in 1960 in Hendon, a suburb of London. Her family was not poor, but barely made ends meet. Dina's father, a prison guard, was passionate about sports. He encouraged Dina to join a sports club, where she practiced gymnastics. He often participated in competitions and traveled abroad, often taking Dina with him. Dina grew up to be a cheerful and sociable girl, which made it easy for her to meet and connect with boys. After graduating from university, Dina found a job. In 1982, at the age of 22, she met a young man named Lee Wyatt on a date arranged by Lee's cousin. They felt a strong connection from the first meeting. 2 years later, in 1984, they married. After the wedding, they moved to Yapton, a small village in West Sussex, England, with a population of only 3,000. In Yapton, the Dana family welcomed a son, and Dina began working as a treasurer at a construction company. Meanwhile, Lee started a business selling designer-stuffed toys, which they designed together. Their neighbors considered them a typical family. The neighbors did not have a close relationship with the Dina family. However, the attractive Dina often attracted the attention of local men. In 1991, the 31-year-old Dina met a local journalist named Julian Webb. He wrote articles about products sold in shops across West Sussex. Julian, 28, asked Dina to model clothes and display household items for money. She accepted his offer, and soon her picture appeared in the local newspapers. A month after Dina and Julian met, neighbors spotted them kissing near Julian's house. A few months later, Julian took Dina to his mother and expressed his desire to marry her. Julian's mother was surprised at how quickly things had progressed. She noted that Julian had met Dina in May, and by August, they were planning their wedding. Soon the whole village of Yapton knew about it. It was also known that Dina was still legally married to her first husband, Lee Wyatt. However, Lee had been missing for a long time at the time, and no one knew where he was. On the north coast of Cornwall, in the small resort town of Newquay, a young man named Colin Mitchell arrived and began looking for work at various entertainment venues. He was hired as a junior manager at an arcade. Colin provided his papers and explained that he had left West Sussex due to some problems. Initially, he appeared friendly and cheerful to everyone. However, it was soon realized that he was slightly deaf, which sometimes made communication difficult. As a result, the arcade staff often had to approach him and gently tap him on the shoulder to get his attention. It was soon realized that Colin Mitchell was his alias. His real name was Lee Wyatt. He explained that he had escaped trouble in West Sussex. Living with Dina in the village of Yapton, his wife was involved in toy manufacturing. Their most popular product was a leprechaun called Sean, who sold well both locally and outside the county. In the summer of 1991, Dina informed Lee that the Disney Corporation was interested in Shaun the Leprechaun and was willing to pay $50 million for the rights to the character. Dina then informed Lee that the mafia had found out about their arrangement and was threatening to kill the entire family unless they handed over most of their money. Dina convinced him that he needed to flee immediately to protect his family. Lee obtained documents under the name Colin Mitchell and traveled to Cornwall County. The decision to flee may have saved his life. However, the real threat was not from the mafia, as there had never been any deal with Disney. Dina made up the story and convinced her husband that it was true. While on the run, he lived in an unfamiliar city under a false identity as a homeless person. He worked and sent most of his earnings to his son, continuing to support the family. On November 2, 1991, Dina used her money to marry her second husband, journalist Julian Webb. Lee was away and unaware of the situation. Julian was overjoyed to marry Dina, believing she was now his. However, a few months after the wedding, Dina informed Julian that she was terminally ill and that her company was pressuring her to resign. $26,000 had gone missing from the accounts of the companies where Dina worked as treasurer, prompting the police to focus their investigation on her. Dina claimed that her first husband, Lee Wyatt, was responsible for the theft. She alleged that he had stolen the money and gone into hiding, but that he had now returned to their village of Yapton and threatened her. Dina produced threatening letters from Lee and shared recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of seeking revenge. She also alleged that he had come to her home and assaulted her. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Notably, a few months after Dina married Julian, Lee returned to Yapton when he learned of Dina's marriage. Lee created scandals involving Dina. The police believed Dina's accusations and began pursuing Lee, who went into hiding. The lies complicated Dina's life and the lives of the men involved with her. Julian had given Dina $25,000 from his savings to treat a terminal illness that she claimed was the reason she had lost her job. However, as the money began to run out, Julian began asking Dina about her progress. To his surprise, Dina had no medical documents to prove that she was actually ill or receiving treatment. On 30 June 1994, Julian celebrated his 300th birthday at home with his wife, Dana. In the evening, Julian's mother called, but Dina answered the phone and said that Julian was feeling unwell and unable to talk. The mother suggested that Dina call a doctor, but Dina did not follow this advice. That night, Julian died. Forensic experts concluded that he had died from a drug overdose, but they were unable to determine whether his death was a result of criminal activity. Dina insisted that Julian had chosen to end his life. When police questioned the neighbors, they learned that there had been unusual activity involving the couple 2 to 4 days before the tragedy. Dina and Julian had been arguing loudly about money, which surprised their neighbors, as they were not used to hearing arguments in Dina's household. Julian was generally considered a positive and cheerful person. The day after Julian's tragic death, Dina went to his workplace to ask about receiving $35,000 from his insurance policy. However, it is reported that she never received the money. In addition, their marriage was considered invalid because Dina was still the legal wife of her first husband, Lee Wyatt. Dina insisted on having Julian's body cremated, but his mother strongly opposed the decision. At Julian's funeral, Dina wore a black leather miniskirt and a revealing black blouse, showing no sign of grief. After Julian's death, she turned her home into a meeting place for men. Although many men visited her, none stayed for more than a day. In 1997, Dina officially divorced her first husband, Lee Wyatt, and won her freedom. The following year, she met Richard Thompson. Shortly after meeting him, Dina confided that she was battling breast cancer. Richard, who supported her, gave her all of his savings and promised to make the rest of her life enjoyable. They traveled from England to Florida, where Richard had a lavish wedding ceremony at a luxury hotel with staff as witnesses. After the wedding, they moved to Brighton, East Sussex, on the south coast of England. Richard had always wanted to buy a boat and pursue a career in fishing. Dina encouraged him to take courses to start a yacht charter business for amateur fishermen, while Richard would take on the role of captain, helping beginners learn how to fish. 8 months after the wedding, Dina told her husband that she wanted to give him a special gift. On January 1, 2000, they decided to take a shower together. Dina then asked if she could tie Richard up, and he agreed. She tied him up, gagged him, and covered his face with a towel. Richard then waited, confused, for what he thought was a prank. Suddenly, Dina hit him with a baseball bat, followed by another blow. Fortunately, Richard freed his hands and lunged at her. At that point, Dina grabbed a knife and stabbed him in the shoulder. Only then was Richard able to grab Dina and subdue her. Richard reported the incident to the police. Dina accused her husband of assaulting her, claiming that she acted in self-defense. The next day, a real estate staff came to Richard's house, expecting to meet Dina to sell real estate. Richard was surprised when he opened the door. When he saw the agent, Richard realized what was going on. He suspected Dina had planned to kill him, sell the house, and disappear, knowing that since he was going to America, no one would look for him during the trial. Dina drained Richard's bank account by forging his signature. She also accumulated a large debt on his credit cards. In addition, they reported other victims, former lovers of Dana, including businessmen, teachers, prison guards, and even a convicted felon. All of these men claimed that Dana manipulated them, demanding money and pretending to be seriously ill. Dana asked for money from many men. While some gave her money willingly, others had their accounts secretly drained by Dana. The truth about her first husband, Lee, was revealed. In 1991, Dana stole money from her workplace, where she worked as a cashier. At the time, she produced threatening letters allegedly written by Lee and played recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of possible revenge. However, in 2000, it was revealed that the letters and recordings were made while Lee was preparing to escape from a mafia organization. Dina had convinced him to do so in order to make people think he had disappeared and abandoned her. Lee believed this would protect him and their son from threats from the mafia. In 2000, a jury acquitted Dina Thompson in a case involving an alleged assault on her third husband, Richard Thompson. The judge described Richard as a paranoid attention seeker. Although Dina was cleared of the felony charge, she was convicted of 15 other counts of financial fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. A strange incident involving her husband, coupled with complaints about her from multiple lovers, led to an investigation into Dina and the death of her second husband, Julian Webb. Dina gave conflicting accounts of what happened to Julian. She told her mother that he had sunstroke after drinking too much on his birthday and fell asleep in the sun. However, Julian's mother did not believe this story, knowing that he had always been healthy and rarely drank. She often urged Julian to leave Dina. Dina claimed to investigators that Julian had taken his own life, but those who knew him found this hard to believe, as he was usually cheerful and rarely had conflicts with anyone. To a former co-worker, Dina mentioned that Julian died from a steroid overdose to maintain his healthy physique, but this was also false. A friend of Dina's revealed that she had hinted at poisoning her second husband, Julian, by secretly adding the drug to Julian's favorite spicy food. The police tracked down the owner of a small restaurant where Julian frequently ordered. They recalled that on the day Julian died, Dina had gone to the restaurant and ordered rice with curry in a takeout box. Police speculated that the strong flavor of the curry may have effectively masked the bitter taste of the medication. In October 2001, 7 years after Julian's death, the investigation into his death continued. Julian's body was exhumed and sent for a re-examination. New tests, unlike the original ones, found higher levels of the drug in his system. It was discovered that he had been poisoned with a large dose of antidepressants, which Dina had mixed into Julian's favorite dish, curry rice. In addition, she had added a large dose of aspirin to the drink he had with his meal. On his birthday, when Julian's mother called to congratulate him, he was lying in bed, almost unconscious. At that point, there was still a chance to save him. The trial of 43-year-old Dina Thompson took place in 2003. A senior police officer said she was the most dangerous woman he had ever met. The judge also noted that Dina was one of the best prolific liars he had ever seen. In 2003, Dina Thompson was convicted of murdering her second husband, Julian Webb. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Dina's crimes were reported on numerous television shows, crime magazines, and newspapers, earning her the nickname the Black Widow. In 2010, police began investigating the disappearance of Stoyan Kostov, one of Dina's first lovers from Bulgaria. Dina and Stoyan were in a relationship from the late 1970s to the early 1980s. During her childhood, Dina and her father traveled to competitions in various countries, including Bulgaria. During one of these trips, Dina met a young man and they quickly became close friends. Stoyan's family mentioned a number of strange incidents involving him and Dina. After their brief relationship, the young man mysteriously disappeared and was never found, dead or alive. It is suspected that Stoyan may have been one of Dina's first victims. While in prison, Dina attended rehabilitation courses and worked with a psychologist. In 2021, the police investigating her case expressed concern about her chances of being released, stating that she would commit another crime. Dina would not be able to stop, as she showed no remorse. However, during her time in prison, she was considered a model prisoner and always spoke positively. Dina Thompson, 61, was released from prison in the summer of 2022. Upon her release, she must notify the police of any romantic relationships she has had. She is also banned from contacting her ex-husbands and other men affected by her actions. Dina must also wear a tracking bracelet to monitor her movements, abide by a curfew, and provide details of her banking transactions if requested by the police. Richard Thompson, 63, who still lives in East Sussex, runs a property maintenance business. After learning of Dina's release, he expressed concern for his safety. Fully aware of what his ex-wife could do, he feared that his peaceful life was over. In July 2022, British newspapers published photos of Dina leaving a discount store carrying a large bag. Dina is now free to walk the streets of England. It is uncertain whether she has lured more victims or whether she has truly changed and chosen to live a better life.